everyone, this is Mirdad and I hope you are doing well. This is Tableau 2 assignment, and in this assignment we are going to use a sample superstore data that's come from the Tableau public library, and there are two files on Blackboard. The first file is the dataset sample superstore file in Excel format, and of course the instruction of the assignment in Word document. So make sure to go ahead and download both of them, and let me go ahead and open the instruction file. So under the instruction there are two main parts. First part, you have to go to this public Tableau website, and if you go to that website you will see a specific dashboard created based on the weather information and how much the precipitation actually have influenced the delay in different airports and major airports in the US. So for example, the Detroit airport, the DFW in Dallas, the Seattle, all of these airports, they have a series of information related to them, and then for each month you will see the overall delay, and for each of the airports you definitely can also click on each of them and see more detailed information about that specific airport. But what matters here is that the value that is used here is the WD MIP, or weather delay minutes per inch of precipitation. And whenever the metric is higher, it means the weather actually influences the delay much more. And then we have or they have actually calculated the z-score for all of these airports, and then see the higher values for z-score is shown as a very dark red color. That is an indication of a high impact of the weather precipitation in the delay of that specific airport. For example, in January in Chicago, you'll see a very high impact of precipitation. However, if you go to May, you see that is a negative value. Basically, weather doesn't have an impact on the precipitation. The precipitation doesn't have an impact on the weather, on the airport delays. So, based on those, try to answer all these four questions and make sure you include the interpretation based off the visuals that you will see. And then good luck with the first part. Alright, on the second part, we are going to focus on sample superstore data, and we are going to implement a couple of predictive analytics methods. It's very important to understand what is the data, what are the types of variables that we have, and what are the methods that would be applicable for that specific variable set. So for example, in terms of the methods, we are going to take a look at just a simple trend lines. We are going to apply the forecasting methods, and of course we are going to apply the clustering method to the variables that we are interested in. But the question that we are trying to answer is based on the specific problem that we are trying to resolve. So in each part, make sure you understand what is the specific goal and try to find the relative variable for those questions, for that question, and answer it based on the result of analysis. So for the first exercise, we are going to first create a scatter plot, and based on the scatter plot, we are going to create a trend line Trendline. And what we can do here on Tableau, click on the analytics menu. There are lots of other types of models that we can bring in, but right now we are interested in Trendline. So let's just click on that, hold the left mouse button down, and we see the linear trend line. That's what we are going to import right now. It is going to give us three different trend lines, and then the good thing about it is that every of the lines, it has its R squared, p-value, as well as the regression model. So for example, for the furniture category, as you can see, the p-value is high, so that model is not significant. However, for the office supplies, excuse me, for the technology category, the p-value is less than 5%. So in the 95% confidence interval, that is a significant line, and the R square is of course high, 90%. So we can actually explain the profit based off sales for the for the technology category. So it's a good thing about how you can actually interpret that. So make sure you can actually understand what's going on here. And of course, the last thing, you can actually rename the worksheet. I would just call the relationship between sales and profits. And when I do that, it just adds that to my title. So it's much easier when I want to find it later on. So the next step I want to do is to extract the formulas for regression or linear regression for every single category they have, and write it down and understand that what does the meaning of each of these, and then how I can interpret it, and then based on that I can answer these three questions. It's very important to know what you can do with the data, with the specific trend line and the modeling. Very simple model, the linear regression. So on question number 2, under question number 2, we are going to add a specific variable. That we are going to create specific chart, and we are going to name it good versus bad customers. It's not about the customers, it's about the profit we're making off of these customers. So if the customers are profitable for us, of course they are good customers. If we are losing money because of these discounts that we're giving to the customers, they are going to be the bad customers for our business. So if we have more good customers, of course the overall profitability would be positive, and that's what we want. But if you have more bad customers, the profit would be negative. So basically we're losing money because we're giving all these discounts. So what we are going to do, we are going to create a specific chart for the sales versus profit, and identify the most versus least profitable customers for this sample superstore. So let me go back to the Tableau, and we are going to add sales and of course profits. So what you can do here, just go to the analysis menu and uncheck the aggregate measure, so you can actually see the individual customers. So if you want to also know their name, you can bring the customer name and drop it on the marks into the label tab, and then every single customer, now you can identify that individual. And as for example Sean Miller, in the negative profit margin, they are basically buying a lot. The sales is high, but the profit, overall profit, is negative. Maybe that's because of the discounts we're giving to that individual. However, tomorrow, Chan, it is a very profitable customer. That person is buying a lot, the sales is very high, at the same time the profit is more than 8400. So it's good type of customer. So we can actually rename this sheet and say good versus bad customers. And then also we can bring a specific coloring, because right now it's hard to identify, even though we have the zero access for the profit. It's hard to identify which customer is going to be profitable or not, specifically in the middle. That is a little bit crowded. So what we can do is just bring the profit and drop it under the color, Perfect. So we can see different coloring for a positive or negative uh, value customer. So we can actually change the coloring if you want. I prefer to have more of the reddish color for the negative values, and for the positive values the green value. So there is actually a good theme for that in Tableau. So let me see if I can find it, and red to green diverging, and if I do that right away I can identify the green and the red areas. So it's very important to be able to add more visualization to your chart to make it more readable, understandable. Alright, so we got that part taken care of, and then last thing we can do is to go again to the analytics menu and bring the trend line and just drag and drop, and you will see the p-value is very small, which means the model is significant. So basically based on the cells uh, we can predict, or we can explain the profit, and our score is 22% or 23%. So basically it's not very high because there are lots of other variables included, but based on just sales we can explain 22 or 23% of the profits for these customers. Alright, so we have actually explained that very quickly based on the trend line. And now the last question is about the average profit for the customers. All the things that we have done here up to this point are based on the sum of the values, so we can actually change that to the average value instead of the sum. So basically not just including the overall sales, but just the average sales for each of the individuals that we have. So what we can do, we can change the sum of these variables to the average. So what I can do here is just duplicate the sheet because I don't want to uh, influence the original sheet. So I can here on the cells change it to the average. And again, just hover your mouse, see that small option, just click, and gives you again the average. So we will see the average for each of the, but what we are going to focus on is the discount, not the profit. So not the sales. So we are going to remove the sales and bring the discount because we want to see how much the discount actually influence the profit of these individuals. So we can basically, alright, so the next step is to understand if the discount has an impact on the profit. So let me go ahead and open a new worksheet, and we are going to bring in a discount here, and of course the profit under the row. So basically that's what we are going to predict. So that's why would be the y-axis value or under the rows. So let's just change these measures to averages instead of the sum. And the last thing is to bring the customer name, drop it under the label. So now we have all these customers with the discount as well as the amount of profit for each individual. So now again we can bring in the trend line and so see how we can actually uh, predict or explain the average of profit based off the average discount. So let's take a look at the model here. The p-value is very small. Basically the model is significant. The R score is 11%, and the actual regression model, as you can see, the coefficient of the average discount is negative. So basically if you provide more discounts you are going to lose profits, and that's what happens here. More discounts, when you go over to this side, it actually influences the profit. For example, for Cindy or for Charlie we have less profits, and that's because of the overall more discounts that these individuals were offered. So we can actually rename this one discount versus profit, and profit. Let me go back to the instruction, and then based on that you can answer this question number 3. So on exercise part 2 we are going to generate some forecasts. So let me go back to the Tableau document and create a new worksheet. There are a couple of variables we are going to incorporate here. First is going to be our yearly data. So under the order date we are going to bring in the order date, just drop it under the year, under the column, and then we have also sales, and we are going to bring the sales and of course the profits and put it under the rows. So let's see what happens here. So we have the sales and then we have the profit. Great. And as you can see, each, because we have two different variables under the rows, each one will be displayed on a separate area. But let's just take a look at the y-axis. So the scale of the sales are much higher than the profits. So if you want to actually combine these two charts, it's hard to understand, and then of course on the same area it's hard to understand. But there is a way that we can do that. So let's just bring in the profit. We want to combine these two charts, so let's just select the profit, hold the left mouse button down, and see that you see two kind of equal sign, the reverse equal sign appears. Just drop it under the sales, and now we have two different values, one for the sales, the orange line is for the sales, and then we have one for the profit. And then as you can see, as you can imagine, the scale of the sales are much higher than the profit, so that's why the profit line would be displayed at the bottom. Okay. So we already have covered that portion. What else we can do here is that, what if we want to have more details in the order dates? Right now it's yearly, but wouldn't it be better to have a continuous value of the monthly sales and the monthly profits? So we can select the year. This is the discrete value right now, but you can actually change it right away from the discrete that is shown up there to a more continuous value. And let me select the month here. Great, so now we have a continuous changes of the sales and profits over different months in the year. And of course, as you can imagine, you have more sales toward the end of the year, and of course less sales around the springtime. So that is and of course February, right after the peak, and it is this behavior known as a seasonality effect. So it is very important that we have the seasonality effect that we can use to forecast something for the future. If we do not understand the seasonality effect now, we do not have the right tool to forecast for the future. This is not going to be a linear line. This is going to be more of a trend line that is matching or fitting to the seasonality or the trend effect altogether. So under the forecast, again, go to the analytics menu and bring in the forecast. There's only one option, add the forecast line here. Let's see what happens. Okay, so we have the data that we had was all the way to 2017. Now we are able to forecast or predict something for 2019 or 2018 that we did not have a data for. And as you can see, specifically for the sales, the line is not linear. It actually follows a seasonality, and it's very important to know that that is because of the way that we have the data. All right. And based on that, of course, you can answer very important questions, but there is another thing that we need to basically take a look at. We can take a look at the sales and profits here, take a look at the sales of the forecast results, or the forecast results of the profits, or on the chart, on the area that you have here. On any of the charts, you want to explain the forecasting model with all of the values that are used. You can actually right click and you'll see the forecast is selected. Click on the describe forecast. Now we have a summary of the model that was used, the initial values for December 2017 and how much change has happened, and then the seasonality or trend component. As you can see, the profit is basically just a trend line, while the sales was a seasonality model, and the forecast is shown for 2018. And let's go back to the second part, which is the model, and these are some of the values that explain how much the model is accurate and if it's a good model or not. And you can take a look at the description of these values. But basically RMSE, or the root mean square error, explains how accurate this model is compared to the residuals, right? So the smaller the value is better. And there are two components for that, and there is an additive model, and here is just additive model. But you are going to take a look at these values because they are important when you are trying to compare a couple of models together, right? So that's when you actually have a chance to pick the best model. So let me close that, and then you can answer this question number 4 and 5. So the last part is the clustering portion. So we have created the trend line, we have created the forecasting line. Now we are going to create a cluster method. We have to apply cluster method, and just going back to the good and bad customers, is there a way to cluster them, group them into different categories, and understand what is going on here, so we can still provide the discounts but make sure that we are also getting enough profit for these customers. So let me go back to Tableau here, and of course you can rename the previous worksheet the forecast, and let's create a new worksheet. We are going to bring the sales to the columns and profit to the rows. So we have sales here, and then we have profits, great. And we are going to add a customer name to the label mark. So we have the customer name here, and we have the label mark. Basically a scatter plot of the sales over the profit, the good bad customer. Now we are going to bring in, under the analytics menu, we are going to bring in the cluster model, the last one. So bring in the cluster model. Right away it tells you which variable do you want to choose and how many clusters do you need. What we are interested more is not the cells. So we can actually remove the cells. Just right click and remove, and under the cluster select 6 clusters. Right, so we have 6 clusters of the customers based on the profit that we are able to get from them. So I can rename the sheet to clusters, and so we've got the clusters. The only thing remains here is that we need to know and understand what are these clusters. So under the clusters, if you click under the mark under the clusters, you see an option here, describe clusters. So let me select that. So now we have 6 clusters. How many items or basically customers are included in that cluster, and what is the sum of profit? Remember, we removed the sales, so what is the sum of profit for that cluster? So basically we can now identify the most hurtful cluster, cluster 4 with 19 customers, and they are imposing a lot of loss for our profit. And then we have the most profitable cluster, cluster 6 with only 1 member, or even cluster 5 with only 1 member, 69.76. Okay, so again, how you can get to that is to click on the clusters and select describe clusters. And anytime you want to change the clustering, you can also select edit clusters, add the new variable, or change the number of clusters. And based on that, you can understand the relationship between the variables that you have used for the clustering and how they influence the profit that you have, and answer these questions, and finally submit all of the answers as well as the final Tableau package workbook. And I hope you guys have enjoyed this, and I'll see you soon.